You can take this chair and start.
The first one?
Yeah, the first one.
But I'm missing two more, right? Two speakers.
Just give me 1 second. We'll start.
We will start. We won't. Okay. Till they're here, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're still waiting for a couple of speakers.
Ahí estás, ya.
Just a couple of seconds. They're just coming out. Just 2 seconds.
Sure,
2 seconds. I'm so
2
sorry.
seconds. 1, 2.
Estamos esperando a los invitados.
We can have you join us on stage. Please. So, and now you can start.
Yes, it makes it easier. That's
So,
Mr. Cárdenas is missing.
Ya me aburrí, ya no quiero.
so you can start.
No,
It's on,
no,
right? I
Mr.
don't need to
Cárdenas
touch
is
it.
missing. He's coming.
No, we'll start and then they can join the panel.
You sure?
Yeah,
As you
I'm
wish.
sure.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I was here, but
Never mind.
thank you.
Thanks. México, ¿llega tarde? No.
Okay, so we have all the speakers. Finally, my sincerest apologies to all. Carolina, you can begin.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here and for your interest on Latin America. This is the only session in Latin America now, and I'm really honored to moderate it. Avenues for the Americas, Deciphering the Latin Beat. Don't expect us to dance on stage. I don't think so. That is not the plan. But of course, the Latin beat is one of the cliches for the region. My name is Carolina Chimoy. I'm an international correspondent for DW, Deutsche Welle, Germany's international broadcast. And we will be talking about a continent that is also famous for many other things. Like, for example, it's a quite peaceful region, I would say. We haven't seen any major wars during the past times. It's geopolitical, very interesting, of course. And there is also an economic potential in Latin America. The big question, of course, framed in the context of the Raisina dialogues this year is where is Latin America standing and where is it moving to regarding the huge shifts and changes we're witnessing. Changes that started to be quite strong perhaps 57 days ago. Yeah, well, let's see how the continent moves forward and if it starts to create new connections to other regions. And this is why I have a very interesting panel with me here today. With me, the Minister of Foreign Affairs from Peru, Mercier Salcedo. Also, the Minister of Foreign Affairs from Antigua Barbuda, Mr. Chet Green. Minister, thank you for being here. Héctor Cárdenas, he's the president of probably the most influential think tank in Mexico, Consejo Mexicano de Asuntos Internacionales. Katie da Rocha Gomez, she's the director of international studies, also at one of Brazil's most important think tanks, Instituto de Pesquisa Económica Aplicada. And Aude Darnal, she's a research analyst and a project manager at the Simpson Center, and she came all the way from Washington, D.C., as well as all of the panelists, a very long flight, flying over Russia, by the way, most of you. Mr. Cárdenas, I would like to start with you because, of course, we've been hearing about the tariffs imposed from the United States towards Mexico, the immigration policy from the U.S., which also, of course, strongly affects Mexico. And there is this saying, most of the people who are familiar with Latin America will know it. It says, Mexico so far away from God, meaning the national challenges, and so close to the United States. Would you say that this saying is now more true than ever?
Thank you, Carolina. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me here. No, I think, that it's a very old saying. It dates from the 19th century. I think a lot has changed in the last, 125 5 years. And even though we're obviously seeing a very, very big changes in the U.S. posture towards pretty much the rest of the world, and certainly towards Mexico and Canada and the region of Latin America, more broadly, I think that there are some constants that are the result of building a very, very solid partnership over the past 40 years. So what you've seen in the case of Mexico is a very, very strong bet on integration and on the benefits of tight coupling of the Mexican economy with the rest of the North American economy. So with the United States and with Canada as well. And that has been one of the most important, I think it's a really important geopolitical bet that was placed by all three countries. And it's given great dividends. And I think that even though there are these disruptions right now because of the threat of tariffs, but in the end, it's in the interest of all three countries to continue on this route of integration and coupling of the economies. So I think that yes, there's going to be turbulence. In the last few weeks, we've seen a lot of turbulence. But as it's been quite well documented and observed, Mexico has actually done pretty well, thanks, I think, in large part to our president's, deft and careful handling of the relationship with the United States and with President Trump in particular. I think Mexico has come out fairly well in the first few weeks. Of course, there's a lot more that has to happen, and thinking about the kinds of problems and challenges that the entire region faces. Those are really encapsulated in the kinds of conversations that Mexico and the United States are having. And they're around, obviously, they're around security and crime and organized crime. And you said that Latin America is perhaps geopolitically the most peaceful region on the earth, but it is also the most violent region.
Of course, yeah.
It's 8% of the world's population, and a third of homicides happen in Latin America, in the continent. And so that's a very big challenge, and I think it underlies some of these discussions. And the other one, of course, is migration. And of course, migration is a continental issue, and it comes from Venezuela, Haiti, also some parts of Central America, and it passes through Mexico and goes to the United States. And it's a problem that we're going to have to deal with as a whole region. I don't think that just individual measures taken by any one country are enough to organize and order this migration, which is very important, and it has to be organized in a way that serves everybody's purposes.
Mr. Cardenas, one follow-up on that, because I remember, you're talking about the cooperation, Canada, the US, and Mexico. I remember covering that one, and the media were writing about the three big amigos, right? So back then, AMLO and former President Biden. Would you see the three amigos with Donald Trump?
Well, I don't know. We'll have to see how Mark Carney does in the next few weeks, right? Yeah. But I think at least you have an amiga and an amigo between President Sheinbaum and President Trump. I think they hit it off decently well, which is something to root for. And hopefully, I think this is more than a question of just personal, personal sympathies. I think there's a strategic imperative that the United States, Mexico, and Canada work together. And Mexico is that bridge also towards the rest of Latin America, certainly towards all of Central America, all the way down to Colombia.
From the US, but now looking, for example, at Peru, Minister Schialer, there is also this strong connection to China, and you know that I'm going to talk about the huge project, the port in Chancay. How important is China really to Peru, and do you think that now it can become a more important relation regarding the nationalistic trends we're seeing?
Well, thank you very much, Carolina, for having us here in this very important panel in the Raisina dialogue. Well, indeed, I would say that China has established herself in Peru as the leading trading partner and investor in only 10 years in Peru. When we began, and both countries had the same level about 10, 15 years ago, the United States and China in Peru had almost the same level of trading and also investing. And nowadays, you have $33 billion Chinese investment in Peru, and against $10 billion of United States investments in Peru. And you have more or less $30+ billion yearly trading with China, and against 1/3 less, more or less $20 billion with Peru and the United States. So China plays a very important role, and it came from behind. It is not something that was geostrategically or geopolitically thought about. We had, and I've spoken this very clearly with our American friends, we had a void, not only in Peru, but also in Latin America as a whole, of presence of the United States. A void that, of course, has been occupied by other partners, including the European Union, of course, including China. And let me tell you, it's a big surprise to everybody that nowadays, and without an FTA, India is the 4th largest trading partner of Peru. And in the next year or the next 2 years, it will be the 3rd largest trading partner with Peru. And the opposite is also true. You have Peru being the 3rd most important trading partner or market in Latin America for India, behind Brazil and Mexico. So this is something that more than geopolitics and geoeconomics, which of course you have, when you see this situation, you have a derivation of geoeconomics and geopolitics, and you can play a little bit what is happening and why it's happening, some moves in some parts of the world. But in reality, what we have in Peru is an open economy, a level playing field, and we are open to all investors. And they come, they can come. So this is something, it is very important. There is no, let's say, plan behind the presence from one country against another country. We have an open economy, as I said. We have a neutrality, very active, in the sense that we look after our national interests. We look after the welfare from our people, be it with the American presence, the European presence, the Chinese presence, and of course now with India, and every day more.
So you also see this as an opportunity, this shifting stance as an opportunity to enhance relations to, for example, India, to China.
I'm sorry, because of the echo, I cannot understand very well.
You see this also, this shifting stance also as an opportunity for Peru to have these relations with China, but also with India, for the national interests as well, right?
Of course, yes,
okay.
Of course.
But at the same time, some think and say that this nationalist interest from the US could also strengthen even more the regional organizations. And this would be perhaps a question to Minister Chet Green. Since your country is also a member, a vital member, I might say, in the Caribbean community, would you say that this community is now or has to be stronger in order to be also attractive for people who are looking to perhaps strengthen this communication and this relation to the Caribbean countries?
Well, I would think that the first thing that we are courting is this whole notion of having to navigate a dance of ideological affinities. And so with this assertive posture of the new US government, Caribbean governments, Antigua and Barbuda included, we have to almost walk between the raindrops I'm using the term of dancing between the raindrops in keeping with the theme of this session, the Latin beat. And it's really a challenge for us because we see an assertive posture on the part of North America, and we see a very engaging posture on the part of China. And we are having to negotiate with both sides, ensuring that we remain relevant, that we can deliver on the expectations of our growth trajectory, on the expectations of healthcare, education, infrastructure, all those things that a modern society need in order to advance. Ours is a tourism-based economy. And so you'll understand that with a heavy dependence on North American tourism and a heavy dependence, if I use that term, on Chinese benevolence, we have to work between both ends of the spectrum. And so remaining relevant in today's environment causes the fashion a policy of respect for both of the global powers without ourselves being seen to take sides, if I may use that term, where the international power structures are concerned. And so for small island developing states, the current geopolitical realities are very challenging. The realities of our existence are certainly demanding a shift in our posture, a shift in our focus. But at the end of it, it's about maintaining credible positions, which allow our countries to remain relevant in today's world while providing leadership. And you did mention it, Antigua and Barbuda is a leader within the Caribbean space. I would dare say we are punching above our weight internationally with the level of support or leadership provided the OAS, for example, and in the Caribbean community. And so we are caught in this modern arrangement of having to deal with the realities of our existence. They're not like they were 1 year ago. And every new day, the challenges become more. We are having to deal with policies of migration, policies of the financial architecture, and all those issues are part of what a modern small island developing state have to contend with, not to mention the existential threat of climate change. And so it's a myriad of things that we have to deal with small island developing states. In the case of Antigua and Barbuda, we have been told that we are graduated, and so we cannot get concessional funding. So that also adds another complexity to our own situation, which is why for us, opening new partnerships and encouraging, for example, greater partnerships with Mercosur, CARICOM, African states, will become part of what we will do in the foreseeable future to keep Caribbean civilization relevant in today's geopolitical space.
And also regarding Latin America, but also, can you hear me? I have the feeling there's something with the sound, right?
Yeah, the mic.
It doesn't work.
Can you hear me? No?
Yeah, it's better.
No.
I think we should use it for everyone.
Yeah, probably it's better. So, Art, I wanted to ask you because, of course, you knowing the region of the Caribbean better, and the new world we're entering, the perhaps post-America world, would this also perhaps mean an opportunity for Europe to jump in, especially for the Caribbean?
But clearly, I think Europe has a role to play. Europe, for example, is pro-climate issues. And as you know, climate is one of the major issues affecting...
I'm sorry, I don't think that. I think it would be better to speak with this mic.
I would say Europe certainly has a role to play. Europe has always presented itself as being climate friendly. We know that climate challenges are certainly on the top of the Caribbean list. And so to have relations with Europe when North America, the USA, has exited the Paris Agreement, it makes all the sense in the world for Caribbean countries to forge close relations with Europe. As we look at the global financial architecture, where we have been delisted and debanked almost, it also makes sense for us to have to develop close relations with Europe. And so as we see the North American policies emerging, and I want to be very clear, we cannot say definitively that we know what North American position is on anything. Every day changes. And so as we witness these changes, these meanderings, it's important the Caribbean civilization identifies other global partners, Europe being one, ASEAN countries being another, the African countries being another yet, so we can have new relations to fall back on as we witness traditional relations seemingly having ebbs and flows. The US is still our #1 trading partner, and so to that extent, based on proximity, it is important for us to maintain the relations. Where security is concerned, it is, again, for proximity, perhaps a natural fit to Caribbean's security issues. But again, we do not have the control over those policies we see emanating. And so as we watch the morphing and the transitioning of US policies to the Caribbean and the rest of the world, it is only reasonable that Caribbean countries begin to engage other blocs across the world to ensure that our civilization continues to thrive, survive, and exist.
I would like to ask you, because you're a project manager precisely also on this, do you think this interest of cooperation with Europe is mutual? Does it come from both sides, or is it just the Caribbean who would be interested and Europe? I mean, I have sometimes the feeling that Europe sees Latin America really as perhaps a forgotten region.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think that is quite the reality, right? Even though we have 3 countries in Europe, the Netherlands, the UK, and France, that have territories in the Caribbean. I mean, I'm from Martinique. I'm from the French Caribbean island. And I think that even in France, the French Caribbean is seen as being quite far. However, as the Europeans and even the Canadians are learning the hard way that they cannot rely just on one power, like being the United States, with the new Trump administration taking over its policies against its allies in Europe, I think Europe is now seeking to diversify their partnerships, and so they're looking south. I contend that this can be mutually beneficial like on both sides, but especially beneficial for the Caribbean countries, because I believe that they should leverage the presence of these 3 countries, as I mentioned, the UK, the Netherlands, and France, and their territories there. Because obviously the challenges that are specific to the Caribbean countries also affect them, whether it is security, whether it is climate insecurity, but also the tensions with the United States, that has impacts on these countries. For instance, in the past week, the United States has taken 2 decisions that directly impact Caribbean countries. First, there was threats against Caribbean countries that cooperate with the Cuban medical missions. And the second one was just a few days ago, a list of potential travel bans for a number of countries were released. It's still a draft, but Antigua and Barbuda is on the list, alongside Dominica, St. Lucia, and others from the Caribbean. So what does that mean exactly for Caribbean partners? And so I contend that actually Caribbean countries should leverage the fact that there are French Caribbean islands, there are other territories, and use that to get concessions, to get diplomatic engagement, to get support from the Europeans. I mean, Martinique welcomed a Cuban medical mission during the COVID-19. I mean, I'm not sure that many people know about that. So that means that an ally from the United States cooperated with the Cuban medical missions. Will the Trump administration, is the Trump administration willing to impose sanctions on a U.S. ally if it decided in the future to cooperate again with the Cuban medical missions? So I contend that France should take a stand in that issue because it itself benefited from these missions. And I think that there are so many other issues where there could be this type of regional integration and support on security, gun trafficking, drug trafficking, but also in terms of investments. I mean, we know. I mean, one of the challenges for small developing island states is that we are seen as small economies, vulnerable, and we are among the most vulnerable region of the world to external shocks, climate, energy, you name it. And so it's very difficult to attract investments. There is also a high cost of capital. And we know how we need to rapidly achieve the green transition. And so, yes, I do believe that European countries should step up. The French government has been, adamantly saying that France is a partner for the Global South. That needs to be more than simple words. It's not enough to say that, France supports the reform of global governance. It needs to be followed by actions. And so, I think it's about time because the clock is ticking. It's not, small island developing states, we are facing existential crisis. Every year we face the risk of being wiped out by a hurricane, right? We have the issue of sea level rising, so on and so forth. So I think that with the Trump administration, going kind of rogue, and now, the United States being led by a fascist government, to be frank, it is more than ever critical for Caribbean countries to diversify their partnerships. And so, Minister, you mentioned India. But that's also that. There's also South-South cooperation, not just with Europe, but it's also South-South cooperation. The Gulf countries have also showed interest to invest in the Caribbean region. And so I can only support that type of diversification of partnerships, but always making sure that they serve the people, that they serve sustainable development, climate action, and that it is, the person, like human-centered partnerships.
And that is the perfect bridge for you, Katie, because I wanted to ask you about this free trade agreement that has been negotiated for 25 years between Mercosur and the EU. Would that really help the people, as Odd is proposing that the new cooperation should look like?
Okay. Can you please take one of these mics?
Okay, thank you, Julia. The Mercosur European Union agreement is a deal trade that is deal trade negotiated for over 20 years. I think these numbers express the challenge when you talk about regional integration in Latin America. This agreement, as many trade agreements, promises some benefits normally related with the reduction of tariffs, but also an expanded market access to agriculture and also industrial products. But its agreement has been referred as a landmark since it was signed because of a modern component that was included in this agreement. First is a commitment with the human rights. It's interesting when I listen now, we have some agreement, or the effort to serve the people. And this agreement, one of the, when you address the labor market, some rules was studied and aligned with the International Labor Organization standards. I think it's an important component. Other point is this agreement try to address the climate emergence, the climate emergence, and the challenge of energy transition. Many requirements and rules of this agreement brings us supporting to the Paris Agreement and reinforce the concern on the climate change in Latin America, but also when you talk about trade, this trade deal. I think the general idea is this. I don't know if I have more time, I can extend.
Thank you so much. I have a question for you also, Mr. Cárdenas. I mean, we were all already talking about that. You can't really talk about Latin America as a monolith. There are different regions, different countries with different interests. And there are these regional organizations like UNASUR, like CAN. Would you say they are almost dead? Because if you want to be attractive for other countries in this changing times, you probably would have to present an organization that is trustful and solid. Do you see this kind of organizations in the region?
Well, I mean, you're right. It's a truism and a joke almost in Latin America that we have more regional organizations than countries, right? We seem to be creating them more and more. We create more and more organizations, and a lot of them are defunct. However, I think there are some important organizations that are working quite well, and that could work even better. I mean, one of the organizations that I think had a lot of success until recently, and I think we have to revive it, is the Alliance for the Pacific. And Peru is a part of that with Mexico and Colombia, etc. And that was a very, very successful alliance. And it sort of it's in a little bit of a disrepair, in large part because of conflicts between the different countries, and have to do more with political issues than real strategic issues. I think that strategically we're very well aligned, and it's a very, very useful organization. Mercosur has had its problems, but it's also a functional organization. And then you have other financing vehicles that have gotten a lot better. CAF, for example, which is started as a Central American financing bank, but it's become really a very important lending institution in all of Latin America and the Caribbean. So you have some jewels there that are worth preserving and strengthening. But I think that the issue is we have to stop thinking as if this was a whole monolith and thinking that there's going to be this magical moment where all of Latin America is going to speak. It's actually more than Latin America, because I want to include also a lot of the Caribbean that is not Latin America in that sense, right? It's English-speaking countries, Dutch-speaking countries, etc. But it's never going to be a single monolith. But what you do have are coalitions of countries that have similar interests and that are converging interests. And if you have positive actions especially of the very large powers in Latin America, Brazil, certainly Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Chile, and Argentina, those are sort of some of the key countries that have to have a positive impact if we can cooperate on specific issues that are of great importance to all of us. Certainly, security is one of them. Migration is another one. And climate change is an area where there's been significant cooperation. And I'm glad to see that my country, Mexico, seems to be now back from what you could call a 6-year hiatus of not doing a lot of cooperation. And now I think that the new government is more interested in these issues. Certainly the president is interested in climate change and wants to have a positive contribution. And I think those are the areas in which Latin American countries can come together and work towards common purposes. And that's going to be very important. And that includes cooperation that could include cooperation with the United States, but also with other regions, including Europe. Mexico also just finished negotiation of a second phase of a free trade agreement with Europe. And so you have all of these developments that could fructify in the next few years if given a chance.
Minister Scheller, would you also include in this group APEC, even though it is, of course, also with the United States, but would you also include APEC? Do you see this also as an essential partnership that could help the region to construct more bonds to other regions?
You hear me well now? You hear me well now? Yeah. Well, yes, of course, APEC is also a very important construction because for Latin America, because it unites us with the northern part of the hemisphere, the United States and Canada, and of course the other rim of the Pacific Ocean, which is where geoeconomics say the experts, is shifting too. So I think this is very important. But let me add before that. Let me add to that particular listing that Mr. Chet Baker started to spell out, and also our Mexican friend. Another issue which is, I think, very important in Latin America. Of course, it is very important migration. Of course, it's very important environmental questions like climate change, but also biodiversity, loss of biodiversity, loss of water resources. You have another thing that is affecting the region, which is the organized crime, transnational organized crime. The bad boys seemingly are achieving something that we governments and people are not able to do, is to get organized and to become transnational. They are coming together, and we are not. We are impeded perhaps by ideology, or even by nationalism, and this ought not to be. I think we have in our organizations on different levels, we have the chance to forget about ideology, to forget about nationalism, and to see that our people get what they need. And a hemispheric effort, something that I just recently experienced and I want to share here with the public, is the OAS, the Organization of American States. We just elected a Secretary General from the Korean country, a historic first, and we did this by acclamation. I think this is a very good jump start to start thinking regionally. We can act locally, and we have to act locally because people live in determined localities. But we must think regionally, and when I say regionally, I don't mean only hemispherically, but also with the partners that the Americas has in regions like the Asia Pacific. And again, I will point out, not only because this is the host country, but because it is a fundamental truth, not only for Peru, but also for other countries. India is spelling out its, let's say, leading role of the global South, and is doing so, giving a chance to everybody to talk out their mind. And basically, this Raisina dialogue is this what we are experiencing now.
Thank you, Minister. This would be my last question, and Minister already answered this question, but perhaps the other ones, because I had a conversation yesterday with two gentlemen who were, we were talking about the relations between Latin America and India, and they were telling me, well, this is like, they don't know each other that well, and the other one was saying, but they're attracted to each other. So my question would be, do you think this attraction could flourish into something more between India and Latin America? From each one of you. I think we already heard your opinion, Minister, but...
Yeah, I think the current global situation demands an exploration of that attraction. Old partnerships are not quite working. The realignment of global realities dictate that we look to new and energized relations. You'd have asked me earlier about the role that Europe could play in a re-energized Latin America and the Caribbean. I want to add to that my answer earlier by saying not only do I look to Europe, to Canada, to ASEAN countries, or African countries, but certainly when we look at the power of the Indian economy, its manufacturing sector, even its philanthropy. I mean, during the COVID years, it was India that the Caribbean first got vaccines from. And so that makes India almost a natural attraction to the Caribbean. Where the Caribbean is concerned, we have a Commonwealth past, which we share in common with India. Cricket is still our #1 sport. There's an Antiguan citizen who is more loved in India than most Indians, in the person of Sir Vivian Richards. And so we see India as that natural attraction, natural fit, as we explore new relations, new development trusts. The paradigm is certainly moving in that direction, and the attraction serves positive purposes.
Okay. Odd?
Yes, thank you, Minister. Yes, I mean, I would say that I mean, in the Caribbean, we share history with India. I mean, you know, after the end of slavery, the colonial powers brought Indian indentures to the Caribbean, and so we share that we know we have people of Indian descent in the Caribbean across the islands, and I think that's also strengthened the need to explore this relationship with India on so many levels, and the minister has alluded to it. But you know, I think one of the challenges that we're experiencing as small islands is that we are importing a lot, right? Food autonomy is something that we're striving for. It is something that takes time, and even in the French Caribbean, it's something that we're struggling with. So I think, you know, for instance, on agricultural cooperation, how could we learn from India so that we could step up and not simply export raw materials like crude oils or banana, cocoa, for instance, to the EU, which is part of the bulk of the products that are exported from the Caribbean to the EU through the Caribbean EU Forum Economic Partnership. How can we actually strengthen our economies so that we are not so dependent on importing? How can we also, in terms of diplomacy, you know, India is a big power, right? It's a rising power. It's a leader on the international scene. And as, you know, small island developing states, we cannot always forgotten in the conversation. And I mean, we know that if we, you know, to be able to be represented at the IMF or the World Bank, if we need to pay, then we'll never be represented because our economy isn't big enough to be able to pay. So how do we make sure that small island developing states are also represented, that their interests are on the international scene in international policy debates? And I think that that's where partnerships between India and the Caribbean countries is valuable. How can we make sure that when India advocates for global governance reform, well, the government also incorporates interests from Caribbean countries. So I do believe that there are so many different aspects and opportunities to explore for those partnerships, and I'm truly hoping that this is the era to invest into it.
Thank you. Katie and Mr. Cárdenas, please.
I think that this debate nowadays is a very complex, we live in a very complex environment when you talk about integration and this kind of initiatives. And I think one thing that you can sure say in this context is that the environment in which countries seek development is becoming more complex. I think that some unilateral measures with immediate impact on economies are more real, and also the threats of applying such measures is becoming more explicit and frequent. And on the other side, some geopolitical issues that were not openly addressed before may now become a concrete subject of negotiation on the table. In this environment, we talk about opportunities, integration, or channels, or space for development is a challenge. So I think when you look at to Latin America, one path, I think, is to look more integrated with countries among the regions. I think you have a geographical proximity and also cultural affinities that means or brings some competitive advantage and also opportunities for our economies, and we may, as Latin American countries, should explore these opportunities and advantages in a way to find a space to navigate in the recent turbulent context. Thank you.
And Mr. Cárdenas, do you see a relationship between Latin America and India growing?
Already we see in Mexico the presence of most of the most important Indian companies already there. Whether it's Tata or other companies are already present there. Of course, you know, Mexican trade and investment is very much linked to the United States and Canada, so it's always going to be the majority. However, that doesn't mean during the last 30 years of NAFTA and then USMCA, overall trade has grown. It's not that these agreements cannibalized, you know, global trade. On the contrary, Mexico's trade has expanded not just with the United States and Canada, but actually worldwide. It's also a very, very open economy, one of the most open economies in the world. And we attract a lot of investment, and we also have a lot of trade. And India is one of those countries. I hope that this will be the beginning of a presence, you know, much more interaction between Mexico and India. And I see a very bright future for us. And I do think that there's a lot of mutual attraction. And certainly, at least we're used to the same kind of very spicy food. And that's always something to look forward to.
And it is an interaction that has been definitely growing during the past years for many countries in Latin America. Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. And just the fact that we have a session on Latin America during the Raisina dialogues is already a good sign, isn't it? Thank you so much. Thanks. I'm afraid we don't have time for questions from the audience.
You can take
Two. Oh, thank you. Thank you. We have time for two questions.
Could I go ahead? Your left-hand side, I guess.
So where?
Yeah, over here. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So my question is for the entire panel. I think in some ways, Argentina is like the perfect example for how the US-China sort of like intentions are shaping up in LATAM. On one hand, you have China using close to you have Argentina using close to $18 billion worth of swap lines from the Chinese. And on the other hand, you have Javier Milei like preaching re-dollarization. So my question pertains to what key takeaways lie for the rest of the Latin countries regarding how Argentina is navigating its situation, and also what do you see IMF's role in Latin America going forward?
Is there someone in the panel that you would address your question to?
I mean, I was kind of addressing it to everyone, so...
Who wants to talk about Argentina and Milei? Not going to do this.
Yes. I have the mic here. Thank you. Well, I have to say that Argentina, it's a study case. No? It is a study case. It is a very rich country. It is the territory of Argentina is as large as India's. And I think they have been having trouble managing their economy the last, 40 years or something. I myself, I have a background in economics, and we used to study how to not do things, economically speaking, no, by studying Argentina. Well, Mr. Milei, you may, of course, not agree with all his politics and his policies, but one thing is sure, the main indicators of an economy, inflation, exchange rate, GDP, etc., growth of or not growth of GDP, you know, are getting each day better for Argentina. So this particular policy, which seems violent to many analysts, no, is working for Argentina. And I'm very happy because it is happening, because a strong Argentina makes a stronger South America and stronger Latin America. So I would say, Mr. Milei, keep on saving Argentina's economy.
Mr. Cárdenas, do you want to add something on that?
Yes, I think it's a very interesting experiment that's going on in Argentina. And if Argentina is able to revert that what seemed to be a secular decline of its economy, I think that'll be very positive for the direction of other economies in Latin America that still need to be more open, I think. They need to be more open. They need to be, we need to really establish true market economies in Latin America. We still have a lot of economies in the continent that are, even if they are market oriented, they're very monopolistic and still very closed in many areas, highly regulated, and it makes it very difficult for the region to really bloom. I mean, one of the sad facts of Latin America is that it has had one of the slowest compounded rates of growth, of all the other continents, and so it's really not been a success story. And I hope that what's going on there and other the experiences of other economies in the region will help to broaden the appeal of freer and more open economies around the region.
We have one more question from the young fellows. Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, hello, gracias por las palabras. I'm from Argentina, actually. So first, I want to ask, a couple of years ago, there was a paper by Argentinians political professors that said that the region has an increasing strategic irrelevance. So I wanted to know what the panel think of that term and what can be done to reverse that trend. And also, I wanted to know your take on the role of digital public infrastructure. How are you thinking about the integration of digital trade in the region? Thank you.
Integration of digital trade. Oh, yes. Do you have a microphone?
Thank you. I'll take the first part of the question in terms of the supposed irrelevance of the region. And taking just a couple examples, when just a few years ago, when the United States tried to create a broad coalition around, the war in Ukraine and the votes at the UN, and in the end, saw that, well, not all countries were voting in alignment with the United States. Well, governments had to find diplomatic support around the world. So, when it comes to diplomatic support, when it comes to diplomatic coalition, I wouldn't say that Latin America and the Caribbean is irrelevant. Now we're seeing that with the trade war that the United States has started, even with its own allies, again, going back to Canada, going to Europe, well, Canada, I saw an article about why Canada should look south and actually pursue greater cooperation with the Caribbean. So I wouldn't say that Latin America and the Caribbean is irrelevant in that case. And so I could continue on and take different examples. But even in terms of, going and playing into the Great Power competition, right? I mean, literally in the United States, you have this, Latin America and the Caribbean is the backyard of the United States. And yet, the United States has not been very present. And yet demands that countries do not partner with China when China invests. So, at the end of the day, and I think, I'm going to join what the minister said earlier, countries are looking to advance their interests and their population's interests. When you're a small island developing states, and again, every year you face the risk of being erased from the map because of hurricanes, you don't really have time to think like philosophical question. The climate imperative is an existential crisis for us. And so you have to look for partnerships. You have to look for investors. You have, of course, you need to negotiate so that those agreements serve your economy, serve your populations. But again, that's where you see that we're not irrelevant because now Europe is seeking to diversify its partnerships. So, I strongly disagree with that argument, and I think that as things evolve, and as the United States certainly will take other policies against its allies, I think that we'll see just that like Latin America and the Caribbean is very much relevant.
Okay, I was about to take one more question, but he just gave me the sign that he's going to kill me if I do so. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, everyone. If I could request everyone to please remain seated.